Om Ajnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Dhena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah.
Vaisesika Prabhu, please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.
Thank you, Gopal Bhatta Prabhu. My obeisances to you. Jai Srila Prabhupada.
So today is the Disappearance Day celebration of His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. And as you know, we've asked you to lead us in your realizations and understanding of Srila Prabhupada, particularly as he is the preeminent Shiksha Guru of ISKCON. SPT, the GBC SPT, has been doing videos, first of all, on COVID, trying to warn devotees about the dangers of this disease and safe practices. We've also been doing a series of videos on different general topics of devotional service and devotee care. And this segment that we have together with you is part of a 9-part series. Yesterday, we met with Malati Prabhu, Hari Sari Prabhu, and Badri Narayan Maharaj, and we had an absolutely wonderful time. Today we have the great honor of spending time with you. At 6 a.m. Pacific time, we'll spend time with Pragosh Prabhu, and at 7 a.m. we'll spend time with Radhanath Maharaj. Tomorrow, we have 3 other devotees also at the same time slots of 5 a.m., 6 a.m., and 7 a.m., all Pacific time. So we want to thank you for leading us in this area. Maybe we could just start with just a few words about yourself. You're a famous devotee, of course, and you are the leader of this movement as it relates to book distribution. You're also an initiating spiritual master and have a thriving center in Silicon Valley. But tell us a bit about yourself, if you don't mind.
Sure. Thank you, Gopal Bhatta Prabhu. I've known you since the early 70s, and we've been friends.
Been my fortune. Been my fortune.
Kochira koso, as they say in Japan. Right back to you. It's very heartfelt to have connection with God brothers and sisters all over the world, which is one of the greatest gifts that Prabhupada gave us, is this association. I joined in San Francisco. I was a spiritual seeker, and Prabhupada saved me. He went out of his way to find an insignificant person hidden away in a suburb of California who wouldn't have ever had a clue about who Krishna is or what the purpose of life is. But it was his genius and his compassion that he didn't just take Krishna consciousness for himself, but he figured out a way to reach out to me, which is a remarkable feat. And so I joined there, and very happily was able to connect with the devotees, join the ashram in San Francisco. And I felt like a fish who had been thrown back in the water. And it's been like that ever since. I'm very, very grateful that I was able to come in contact with Prabhupada and all his devotees and everything that goes along with his association.
Wonderful. Thank you. We are using this phrase, preeminent Shiksha Guru. Actually, there's a GBC resolution that resolves that Srila Prabhupada is the preeminent Shiksha Guru of all time for all ISKCON devotees. Maybe you could just drill down on this word preeminent. Preeminent. What does that mean?
Well, we find this idea of preeminence throughout the Srimad Bhagavatam, for example, where the Mahajans are mentioned. Someone might say, well, why is Why is Bali Maharaja, Mahajan? What about, why Narada? Why Lord Shiva and so forth? Well, because they are. And because they've been empowered in a certain way that nobody else can compare to. They've done something that is obviously so great that it makes a mark in the world. And there are Vaishnavas in history, just as even in the world of science, there are giants that everybody refers to. People don't refer to the others in between as much who have done research following in their footsteps, but really it's about the preeminent devotees and how we follow in their footsteps. They pave the way for us. So Srila Prabhupada is like that. I mean, he founded the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, an unprecedented society which has reached every part of the world. So as he insisted, actually, it's interesting because devotees generally don't promote themselves, but humility doesn't mean that you just stay reticent and you're out of sight. But for the sake of spreading Krishna consciousness all over the world, Prabhupada insisted that his title, founder Acharya, be on every literature. And this is an indication, above all, of his preeminence. That nobody else will ever again found the Krishna consciousness movement because Prabhupada's already done it. And Acharya, as Prabhupada writes in the Srimad Bhagavatam, 10th canto, 2nd chapter, 31st verse, there's an Acharya Sampradaya. That is, we look towards those Acharyas who have set a system that everybody can follow. This is something that, it's a concept, as I mentioned before, in the Srimad Bhagavatam. For instance, the first canto, 2nd chapter, Shukara Sutta Goswami says, Bejare Muniyo Tagre Bhagavan Tamad Hoksajam Satvam Vishudham Shemaya Kalpante Ye Nutaniha. That previously all the great souls worshipped Lord Vishnu because of his existence beyond the three modes of material nature. And anyone who follows those great sages, Kalpante Ye Nutaniha, they're also qualified for the same result. This is the motto of the Acharya Sampradaya. And I mean, there are other references. For instance, 10th canto Srimad Bhagavatam, the demigods praying to Lord Krishna within the womb say, Twayam bujaksha kila satvadamni samadhina veshita chetasaike. Twat pada potena mahakritena kurvanti govatsa padam bababdim. It's a very important verse. They point out to the demigods that Twat pada potena mahatkritena, there are mahatkritena, there are special devotees who for themselves set a system so that they can go back to God and so that everybody else can also.
So this system seems to imply that Srila Prabhupada gave us everything we need. Yes?
Yes. Well, when we talk about everything, what are some of those things? One of the primary things that he emphasized are his writings. And this is one of the ways in which the great sages, the acharyas, with a capital A, those who we note as being members of the Acharya Sampradaya, leave behind. There's literature. One of the things. In fact, literature, according to Joseph T. O'Connell, the late Joseph T. O'Connell, who was a leader in Vaishnava studies in academia, pointed out in a paper that he wrote called Institutionalizing Prema, that there is a hard institution and a soft institution. And the soft institution is the literature. He said it's effective because it carries the culture across time and geography. And, so Srila Prabhupada emphasized that as one of the ways in which, or he gave us that as a means to follow him. And he indicated that we should go deeply within his books. In fact, Gopal Bhatta Prabhu, when I met Prabhupada for the first time in San Francisco in 1973, I was on the book distribution party there, and the temple president was saying things about how many books we were distributing and so forth. Prabhupada looked at us and said, "You must also read my books. I've not written them just for selling. I've given them so that you can read them, become pure devotees, and go back to Godhead." So preeminence in which literatures are foundational to the Krishna consciousness movement. They are the primal and primary sound vibration of the Krishna consciousness movement. Every institution, every sphere in the universe is designated by a quality of sound. And it's the sound of Srila Prabhupada's books, the mood in which he writes, which is very compassionate, following in the footsteps of Prahlad Maharaj, for example. Over and over again, Prabhupada emphasizes that we should try to save other people, not just ourselves. And it carries, his books carry the combined voices of all the previous acharyas.
So when we say, okay, Srila Prabhupada is our preeminent Shiksha Guru, he is our founder acharya, and now he's given us these books, this sound vibration that is the basis of everything that we're doing. This basically means we need to read, we need to understand what we're reading, we need to go even deeper and understand Srila Prabhupada's fundamental intents. You are actually quite famous for reading yourself. Tell us just a bit of some of the things that you've done as it relates to following that instruction that Srila Prabhupada gave you and the book distributors back there in 73, that you must read your books. I mean, my books. Tell us about some of the things that you've done.
Well, Prabhu, I know that before I even met the devotees, I felt Prabhupada's presence. I heard his voice, and amidst numerous writers that I read in a search for the truth before I knew about Krishna consciousness, Prabhupada's books were the signal that emerged from the noise. It was so clear because Prabhupada's fully realized, and he's fully faithful to the parampara. So there's a potency that comes through in his books that I noted when I read them, and all the other books moved out of the way for Prabhupada's books. I mean, they weren't interesting anymore. It's like, okay, here's actually something that's moving me, and I became attached to them. And then upon joining the Krishna consciousness movement, actually the first day I came to the temple to visit, there was a devotee named Janakanath. He was sitting on the steps of the San Francisco temple, and I had come there to meet Prabhupada. In my naivete, I thought he'll probably be there. And I said, I came here to meet the spiritual master. And Janakanath said, oh no, he's not here, he's in India. And then he saw I was disappointed, so he said, but you can meet him through his books. So devotees always knew from the very beginning, as Prabhupada inculcated this idea that you can be connected to me in spirit and know my moods and my directions, everything I had to say, he once said, or several times, I've put in my books. So Prabhupada's books are, well, to say they're important is an understatement. That, you know, they're foundational, and also, are they sufficient? Because nowadays, if you go to Loi Bazaar in Vrindavan, you'll find there's bookshops that have every Purana or every writing that anybody's ever produced. But my experience is, Gopal Bhatta Prabhu, that if if I try to go deeply within the Srimad Bhagavatam or the Chaitanya Charitamrita, will I ever come to the end of it? It's so deep, and there's so much there that if I put the kind of effort into reading Prabhupada's books that he put into writing them, which means he spend his sleep and everything else, that I can't come to the end of it. It just keeps getting deeper and deeper and deeper. And I realize the more I read them, the more I realize how tiny I am in compared to Prabhupada. And that's the voice of the Acharya, because he's representing Krishna. So his book,
but you also, I mean, in one sense, you could say one of the most valuable things that we have just as a human being is our time. And how we choose to use our time indicates, so many different aspects of what we want to do, et cetera, et cetera. You've devoted tremendous amount of time to reading, have you not?
I don't know about tremendous, but I'm trending that way. This time,
for years, you have gone out to Govardhan, for instance, and spent almost a month primarily concentrating on reading. Yes.
Yes.
Tell us about some of that.
This is the first year. This would be year number 20 in a row that we meet at the Bhaktivedanta Ashram in Govardhan, and we read a minimum of 5 hours a day in group. And we just hear from Prabhupada's books and then discuss, as Prabhupada said was the spiritual practice that he'd like us to do, one of the most important. And it's in those gatherings that we realize the profundity of what he's given us. I mean, I'll give you
this was 20-year effort. Which is, of course, being shortchanged by our little COVID
That's
problem.
True, yeah. I mean, I can remember Gopal Bhatta Prabhu. There was a brahmachari that came. Usually we have about 20 devotees that gather in a small room. We cram in there, and it's just, Keshav Bharati Maharaj and I will alternate reading 5 verses and purports, 5 verses, purports, and then we discuss and hear. And we have a quota for ourselves, so we stay on track. And we try to complete, at least a couple of cantos during a 30-day period in Govardhan. But I remember
so am I to understand also that it's not just you sitting and reading, but it's you sitting and reading in the association of like-minded friends, the devotees, and that, and churning it is also part of what you've done, huh?
Yes, in the Adi Lila, first chapter, in the verse that's cited by Kaviraj Goswami, where he says, Tesham satatu yuktanam bhajatam priti purvakam, Prabhupada's purport, he indicates that devotees should be like scientists who come together to discuss their research. And that, they sit in a big chair and they talk back and forth. So he said, this is what edifies devotees. So in this way, I mean, coming back to Prabhupada's preeminence, in this way, when we have this kind of discussion going on, it tends to dissipate all the various conflicts, problems, not all of them, obviously, as you know better than me. But this is the way to stay above the fray, the chatter, and so forth, and is to repair to the deep reading of Srila Prabhupada's books together as a society, as a group. I remember one, it was an event that you put on in Mayapur. I think it was the SGGS, and yes, all the devotees were there. And I think Braja Bihari Prabhu said, why don't we just read Prabhupada's books now? Or somebody said that. So we shut down all the other programs for an hour and a half or 2 hours, and we just read together. And the difference is in the atmosphere is palpable. So, Prabhupada established his preeminence through his books, and we can maintain that sense of his acharyaship and his preeminence just by hearing from him and hearing together and discussing, what did Prabhupada mean by this, and how do these things relate to the way in which we're conducting ourselves in the Krishna conscious movement. I think that is a primary way in which we keep this sense of Prabhupada's preeminence.
And in this dramatic time that we're in, which might last for another year or so, who knows, we can have these reading groups through Zoom very easily, right?
Oh yeah, actually.
So have you started some of that? Tell us about that.
Yeah, sure. We have regular Zoom classes, and we have the principle really that Prabhupada gave us, that Lord Chaitanya gave us, which is Kirtaniya Sadahari. Whatever situation we're in, we have to keep the transcendental vibration going. So using any medium, whether we're in person in a room or over Zoom, the effect is the same if we keep Prabhupada's vibration among us by hearing his book. So yeah, we have regular classes and readings. For instance, Keshav Bharati Maharaj has on Facebook his daily readings of Srila Prabhupada's books, which he's been doing for several years now, where he just reads out loud for an hour and a half and then discusses the same kind of technique that we do at Govardhan.
So drilling down deep, reading in the association. Let's see if we could I'd like to try to understand, what does it take to understand what we're reading? What's behind that? Because we want to just not read, but we have to understand what we're reading. What does that mean?
In Bhagavatam itself, Shrinvatam Swakata Krishna Punya Shravana Kirtana Ridyantaksto Hibadrani Vitunoti Suritsatam. If you're submissive and you listen, even despite the fact that you might not understand what you're hearing at first, then Krishna, who's within the heart, helps to remove obstacles. He's attracted to the sound of the Srimad Bhagavatam. This is mentioned in the Bhagavatam itself, that pranaya rashanaya dhritangi padma sabhagavata, that the Bhagavata is one who ties Krishna in his heart by constantly hearing the holy names and the Srimad Bhagavatam. And Krishna won't leave the heart of those who are sadyo hridyavarudhyate trakriti bishushrushrubhishtakshanat. If you're hearing Bhagavatam, then Krishna becomes enlivened. And he then in turn enlivens us. So, one of the instructions Prabhupada gave was that God helps those who help themselves. Helping yourself means putting yourself in front of transcendental sound vibration. And so if you can drag yourself somehow or other and put yourself in front of that, or if you want to start a Krishna conscious community and you want to have Prabhupada's presence there, make sure that you're giving ample time for the devotees to come together to hear the vibration of Prabhupada's voice through his books, and then discuss, as Prabhupada said, discuss thoroughly, threadbare.
Let's go back to that in a second. I just want to drill down a little more on this. Krishna enjoys this. Part of our life is to understand that we are not the enjoyer, but we are in the enjoyed. So essentially what you're saying is, by thoughtfully reading in association, we are placing ourselves in a position to be enjoyed by the Lord. Yeah.
Yeah, well, you may notice there's a phenomena that's mentioned by Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur in his Madhurya Kanamani, that when you're going through a narta nivriti, there's a tendency that when you do your bhajan, that is, you're chanting Hare Krishna, japa, or you're reading or hearing, that you fall asleep. It's called laya. It's the first obstacle to coming to nishta. And so he says, this is typical. Give someone a Chaitanya Charitamrita, they fall asleep. And if you
I have to say this, I have to just tell you this, because we're interviewing you, not me. But the first time that I went to the temple in New York after I had returned from Morocco, and so I'm coming in there and waking up early and then chanting with them. And I'm watching everyone nodding, and in my naivety, I'm sitting there saying, these people are moving into samadhi. This is amazing. But in fact, and then about 5 minutes later, some leading devotee started walking around, waking everybody up. You know, it's like. But anyway, go ahead.
No,
So,
I like that mood. I think I should preserve that in myself whenever I. That's a nice way to come into devotee sangha. It's just appreciate so deeply.
So okay. So this is one of the things is you start to fall asleep is the first.
Yeah. So you know, you were asking about the point of being there to serve Krishna through hearing and
to be enjoyed by him.
Yeah, to be enjoyed by him. So the reason I brought up the sleep is it's typical for someone who has an artist to think like, why isn't everybody talking about me? So when Krishna book is going on, you know, I'm thinking like, why so much about Krishna? So that's an anartha to be overcome. And if one submits oneself to the process of hearing about the Supreme Personality of Godhead, actually, this is the medicine through which one becomes turned back around again. In fact, this is bhayam dvitiya binibesha tasyad ishad apetasya viparyo smriti. My problem is ishad to Krishna, the controller, ishad apetasya viparyo smriti. My memory is I forgot Krishna, and apetasya I turned the opposite way. I'm not listening to him. I'm not tuned in. So then tanmaya buddha abhajatam bhaktyaka yesha gurudevatama. The method of devotional service really is just turn your attention back to Krishna. And how? Through the guru. Coming back to Prabhupada's preeminent position, you know, he gave us this sound vibration to turn back to. And it's through that method that we actually remember. We remember Krishna and the joy of being enjoyed by him rather than putting ourselves in the center.
And then you also started to just talk about this association. Many devotees, of course, during COVID, many people are in isolation. And we're bridging that isolation through Zoom and phone calls and emails. But generally speaking, many people are a bit alone. They maybe don't have like you, for instance, have a very refined circle of Vaishnavas that you associated with. And you spoke about Govardhan and how, you know, a number of devotees would get together and just read. Is it as simple as just saying, okay, I want to find some devotees to read with, and reaching out and initiating reading groups and things like that, or what would one do if they just felt, okay, I need to read in association with devotees?
Yeah, you know, in the Bhagavatam, 10th canto, 14th chapter, in the purport, Prabhupada, actually it's the servants of Srila Prabhupada, have summarized the commentary of Sridhar Swami of antiquity. And he says that the main duty of every devotee is to somehow or other stay alive in Krishna consciousness. It's in context of the verse that's in which Brahma says that if you stay alive in serving Krishna in this life, or the duty of the son of a rich man is singular, and that is to somehow or other stay alive, because you're going to inherit. So the implication is we must stay alive. So Prabhupada said often that we must be inventive. I mean, you know, things aren't going to go the way we thought they were, as we can all see in this lifetime to various degrees. And so how to stay, you know, connected to that vibration and to the association of devotees, you have to be inventive. So for instance, I have a friend that I connect with regularly for chanting to make sure that we're on track. We text each other and say, when did you finish your 16 rounds? And every once in a while we'll text each other and say, let's chant together for a few minutes to get momentum. You know, so be inventive, find association where you're inspired, and somehow or other insert yourself there and stay alive in Krishna consciousness somehow or other.
So inventive and being assertive. Just go out and say, hey, I'd like to read with you.
Yeah, I always find these reading groups, they could be rare. Like, for instance, if you go to a festival, you'll find most people are on the street talking. And if you listen to the conversation, people are saying like, hey, are you still doing business? Where do you live? And, how's your uncle doing and stuff? But there's a back room somewhere where there's a few devotees that are reading Prabhupada's books. And I always think of it like gamblers. They always look for that game. Where's it going on? And, you get to a new city and it's like, where's the game going on? And you got to have a password to get in there. You like knock on the doors, like, let me in, deal me in on this game. So we should be addicted, like gamblers are addicted to gambling, to finding that place where we can hear from Prabhupada's books. And that is the sustaining force of the Krishna consciousness movement.
I just have one more question on what you might call some technique. You have page by page.
Be a sage, page by page.
Be a sage, page by page. Yeah. Tell us about that program.
Well, I was lamenting the fact that there's so many of Prabhupada's books. It's unimaginable how he produced so much in so little time. And this is one of the symptoms of a great acharya, to be able to do such things. It's unimaginable how he managed the whole movement. He traveled around the world 14 times and he did all these books. How? So I was lamenting, like, how is it that I'm walking on the earth? I'm a so-called disciple of Srila Prabhupada, but I haven't really penetrated. So then I heard this talk by Brian Tracy. And he said, any huge task, any big goal that you're trying to go towards, break it up into the smallest parts possible. Okay. So I thought, aha, Prabhupada's books have a finite number of pages. So why can't we count them and figure out? So we did that. We counted all the pages, and then we said, yes, now if I divide it up by days, by weeks, by months, I can discern how many pages I have to read each day. And then it made it easy. So I made a chart, and then the chart became an app, and it's called Be a Sage page by page. And so, for instance, I read 41 pages of Bhagavatam a day. You know what that means? I finish the Bhagavatam every year from pillar to post, and it's not a huge thing. It's not a big deal. 41 pages, when you add it into your life, is not a big deal.
How many times would you estimate that you've read the Bhagavatam from front to back?
I don't really know. I just know that it's had very little effect on me because I'm so dense. So, no,
but seriously, how many times?
20, I couldn't say, Gopal Pataprabhu. I don't know. I do know that it's an ocean, and I feel like I'm swimming in the ocean, and so this is. I think it should be. What I feel is it was what Prabhupada intended, that we, for instance, in the very beginning of the movement, there were 5 classes a day, and there was there Bhagavatam class, Nectar devotion class, Krishna book reading at night, and so forth. And Prabhupada wanted the primal sound vibration, or the prime sound vibration of the Krishna consciousness movement to be pervasive, and it's a panacea. It really is. The more we emphasize keeping Prabhupada's books in the center. Now, that's not to say other books are not valid. I'm not saying that. But when Prabhupada was asked specifically, there's a conversation you can read on the database when in India, devotees discovered, wow, there's other translations over here. And one of the temple presidents there, Achyutananda Prabhu, had banned people from, buying translations from the Gaudiya Math of other books. And so they brought it to Prabhupada. It's there in a conversation. A Paramahamsa asked Prabhupada. So Prabhupada, devotees are having this argument. And what's the argument, Prabhupada says? Well, he said, you said not to read the books of the works of the previous acharyas. Prabhupada said, I have said? I have not said. I have said you should read the books of the previous acharyas. But then he goes on to make the point, but you should assimilate what you already have. He said, you're piling up stacks of books that you don't read. So my, proposition is that really keeping Prabhupada in the center and understanding his position, founder Acharya, if we keep his books as the primary way in which we connect to him by reading them, distributing them, and so forth, as one of the ways. I mean, there's multiple. I'm not myopic. It's a holistic movement, but I'm just saying this is one of the ways that I'm mentioning in this very short time we have together that really very automatically and in such a sublime way brings us to Prabhupada, the sound vibration. So yeah.
So Shakshi Gopal, he's the devotee who's behind the scenes, helping us. And Shakshi, if you could just capture the answer to the question I'm about to ask Vaisesika Prabhu, where can our audience find the Be a Sage page by page? Where can they find that app?
On the App Store. It's for iOS and also for Android. It's free.
Okay.
You just go to Be a Sage and you'll find it. Be a Sage page. You can download it. And
so just go to the App Store and key in Be a Sage.
Yep.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
We are getting a little bit close to the end of our time. I don't know if this is a valid question. And if it's not a valid question, you just tell me it's not, and we'll find something else to talk about. I wonder about trying to understand Srila Prabhupada's core intentions as part of this reading, understanding, and then getting close to understanding or realizing what Srila Prabhupada's core intentions are. Does that resonate with you? And if it does, can you speak to that?
Well, I mean, there are numerous ways to do that. As part of being part of the and connected to the parampara really means to be open to following the Acharya and to working cooperatively. And it requires that sense of sincerity. And then if we tune in, obviously through Srila Prabhupada's books, they're encyclopedic, and he says many things. I mean, people often get an impression, well, Prabhupada's like this or like that. Read through the whole thing and get the full spectrum of the way Prabhupada thinks and his moods and so forth. And then, of course, we hear from devotees who, fortunately, they're still walking the earth, who sat with Prabhupada, who heard him say things about certain topics. Like, when we want to know something, we ask somebody who is there. You call Shruti Kirti, what did Prabhupada say about this or that? Or others, that have firsthand experience. And in a comprehensive way, we're meant to try to triangulate and understand what is the intention of the Acharya. And if we cooperate under that, with that understanding, we try to do that understanding together, and that's our mood. Cooperate under the Acharya, then we can get great traction in our own spiritual lives and in the spreading of the Krishna consciousness movement.
Mm. And then maybe my last question, which is kind of a follow-up from yesterday's discussions that we had, which came out on a couple of different occasions. Is it that all devotees of ISKCON, grand disciples, grand disciples, that we all have a personal relationship and connection with Srila Prabhupada or founder Acharya? And if so, offer some insight into that.
Well, we're all personalities, right? And we all have independent free will. The Krishna conscious movement is a voluntary movement. It's not something, we're hired into or elected into. And Prabhupada writes and speaks about this point, which always really touches my heart. And that is that it's really based on our own appreciation, which develops into love. Why do people put themselves out to serve? Prabhupada says it's out of love. He said, I don't have a bank account. and I'm not paying anybody to do this. They dropped what they were doing because they recognized that, what my intention is. So really, we can't mandate that, love Prabhupada, put Prabhupada in the center. How can you mandate such a thing? It really is something that emerges from the hearts of devotees when they see and feel that connection for themselves. And we, as, for instance, disciples of Prabhupada, are meant to emulate the ways that he interacted with other devotees. He says in the Upadeshamrita, Dadati Pratigranati, Kuyamakyati Prichit, our movement is based on giving and receiving and loving exchanges. And when we're exhibiting those, then people, they say, oh, well, these people are following Srila Prabhupada, what must he be like? And so forth, And so, yes, everyone has a relationship with Prabhupada and the Krishna consciousness movement, and can feel that through all the means we've talked about in this conversation, because it's a spiritual relationship, and it doesn't mean that that we therefore bypass the present devotees who are followers. There's a sense sometimes people have, well, then I'll just go directly to Prabhupada and forget all these other people. Well, what kind of mood is that? I mean, if you have a tree and then you say, I don't like the fruits on the tree, I like the tree, then, what are you talking about? So I'll just make this final point, and that is that one of the ways that Prabhupada's preeminent is through his followers, through his disciples. If they're not successful, where is the succession? And if they can't also represent Prabhupada, for instance, in writing and speaking and showing an example, his preeminence and his acharyaship comes through his successful disciples, and we feel his connection there also. So as Prabhupada writes in the 18th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, the parampara is, it seems to be indirect, but it's very direct because it's a spiritual relationship.
This has been a wonderful time. I certainly have become inspired, and I think I'm going to read more as a result. I want to thank you so much for all of your time, but then particularly for just how you have chosen to live your life and be so close to Srila Prabhupada, and particularly be so close to his writings. It's just wonderful, Prabhu. Thank you so much.
Same back to you, Gopalpada, but it's really heartfelt to have this time with you. You're so busy. I'm a little busy. You're like a million times more, but whenever I get a chance to see you or have time with you, it's been a pleasure. So meeting in this little portal here under these circumstances on this day, Prabhupada's disappearance day, is very special. I'll never forget it. Thank you.
Jai Prabhu. Please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.
Hare Krishna. Gaur Premanande. Hari Hari Bol.
Hari Hari Bol.
Marman, Natari Marman, Natari Marman, Natari Marman, hey, Natari Marman, Natari Marman, Natari Marman, Natari Marman.